Hello. It says I'm live. I'm just going to let a few people join in before I start my presentation. I see that I'm starting to get a few people clicking in, which that's cool. This will be a technical conversation of just some questions and ideas that I've heard people say or ask over the year for a while, and I'm thankful for everybody that wants to watch and go over some of these pretty neat topics. This will be my first try going live. Like I said, I'm gonna sit here and talk about it for a minute before I start the presentation. I won't be able to answer questions right this minute because I'm gonna try my best to stick to the program that I had. I know that I'm understanding that some of my words on my board are backwards. I guess that's that won't help you at all, but I'll go over them and tell you what the words are. Sorry it's backwards. I guess my hat's backwards too. Maybe I need to learn how to write backwards so that I can make this be a little bit better presentation. But we won't be reading. We'll be talking and listening. Anyway, it's cool. Get to see you guys come in here and be interested in a few of the subjects that we go over all the time. And I get phone calls and emails and private messages a lot from fans and friends that want to know about technical stuff. And I'm sorry the technical stuff is backwards. This says dyno, and this says pipes, and this says cams. That's three really big subjects. And like I said, it's my first time, so somebody said there's an option on here to flip this so that we can see it backwards, but I don't know how that works. Let's try it. Nope, I did the other way. The camera went to the other wall. All right, I'm learning. And somewhere down here it has understanding the clutch. That's on here, so we'll go over that too. But as we go through this, and as this little deal grows, we'll learn more and more about what folks are interested in, what we'll be able to talk about. And I've been racing for a long time. I've been doing this. I've been learning about motorcycle drag racing and drag racing in general. I've been learning about engines my whole life. So with that happening, being blessed to be able to have a pretty good memory and the family behind me the whole time, I've been able to gather tons and tons of information. So it's time to share. It's time to take a lot of that information. I don't even know if anybody knows these days what an encyclopedia is, but before the internet, we used to have to go look it up in the encyclopedia to learn stuff. So this will be fun, just to spit out a few ideas. I'm gonna talk a few more minutes and get some more folks on. I see a few names popping up that remind me of some great days gone by, and I've had a great career, and like I said, I've learned a lot while I've had a great career. One day on one of these, I'm gonna try and do one every week if I can remember. If this goes over well enough, I'll try and do one every week, but I'll explain a little bit about how we got all this information. And somebody said there's a little magic wand. What does the magic wand do? Let's try it. Let's see, magic wand. And then what does that do? All right, I hit the magic wand, now what happens? All right. Hey, it's okay if it's backwards. I'm not gonna talk backwards, I hope. Maybe some of the stuff is on there. But anyway, I'm going to try and stop reading all the comments and go back to my story. Through the last few years, I guess decades now, we've been very fortunate to have raced with a lot of great people, a lot of talented people, and been able to stay focused on the job of learning about racing and winning races and learning how to lose races and learning how to win races. We've gathered tons and tons of information. So hey, my disclaimer here is I want to tell you guys is I am not an expert on this stuff. Yes, I have been very blessed to gather all this information over the years, but these are, I promise you, this is my opinion. These are not the rules. These are not law. These are just guys that I have raced with over the years that have helped me learn stuff, guys and gals. And I gathered some information here that's, I don't feel like it's really my property, but it's property that was shared with lots of people, and I would love to share it with you guys. And I'm very opinionated now. I mean, I got lots, I have my own opinion, and I try my best to bite my lip and not talk out of turn, but please understand these are my opinions about all these subjects that I have up here that are all backwards, but I'll try and do them in order. First thing I want to tell you guys is dyno testing. Here at Star Racing, we have 3 dynos. We have 2 engine dynos. We have 1,000 horsepower Superflow 1000. It's a Superflow 901, I think it's called. It's good for about 1,000 horsepower. We used it to tune and develop the 4-cylinder racing engines that we used in our early pro stock days. Then we also have a DTS dyno that was bought out by Superflow that has a 2,000 horsepower dyno that we use for the development of our V-twins that we race in NHRA more recently, say 2004 to 2016 when I retired from NHRA competition. But racing professionally, and when I say professionally, I'm talking about it was the way we got food, and it was the way we made house payments and bought clothes. It was racing. So a lot of guys and a lot of girls that are on here watching and friends that I've had over the years, they do it when they can. They race when their job or their life allows them to go racing. So I just want you guys to know that one advantage that I've had over these decades is it was my day job. I never worked anywhere else. I never worked on a job where I didn't get to learn about engines. I have always learned about engines. This has been a 40-year college for me, so to speak. So a lot of times we called it Pro Stock University when we were developing the program here. But anyway, going first to the dyno, one thing we've learned about the dyno is the 3 dynos we have. I told you about the Superflow, I told you about the DTS, and then I also told you about the, we have a dyno jet. It's a 150. It's got an electric absorber on it where we can control the engine's, the dyno speed and the wheel speed, and we can load it. So it's a load control dyno, so we can learn a lot about part throttle tuning. We can learn a lot about, getting a good map, making a good map. We'll talk about that further along in our deal. But anyway, the dyno, it has correction factors. Why do we have correction factors, and why does that confuse everybody, and why does one guy post up uncorrected numbers and one guy posts up corrected numbers, and then one time it's STD correction, then one time it's SAE correction? Those are different correction factors. It's all math. The dyno will tell you how fast the engine, the rear tire spun, given an RPM and a time. And the math, the software program, the spreadsheet built into the dynamometer will tell you what the power was, torque and horsepower. Now, the cool thing about the chassis dyno we have is I can drive a motorcycle right up on it, strap it down, and run it through the gears and see what kind of performance it has. Now, the dyno is a good tool to have. It's just like your bathroom scales. If you were going on a diet and you wanted to lose some weight, I would recommend that you use the same bathroom scales every day, because if you go to the doctor's office, it'll tell you one number, and if you go home, it'll tell you another number. And you can even have 2 scales. If you're lucky enough to have 2 bathrooms with 2 scales, you get on one and it could be 5 pounds difference than the one in the other bathroom. And I see that myself. So use one as your go-by, as your standard. So the dyno we use is very consistent. It gives us repeatable results, and we're able to, if we dyno a Harley Davidson, for instance, a new twin cam that's got a piston kit and some pipes, and it says made 100 horsepower. Okay, if it's SAE corrected, that might be 100 horsepower. If it's STD corrected, that could be 101 or 102 horsepower. If it's a really hot and humid day, it could be uncorrected at 95 or 94 horsepower. But when you're in the winter time and the air is really great and the skies are high blue and you got big barometer and it's cold, you could have 110 horsepower. So please understand that the same motorcycle with the same tune could be as 10 or 15 horsepower difference from one day to the other. So that's really hard to comprehend or to compare. So that's why correction factors are so important. Because if you didn't have a correction factor, it wouldn't tell you what the power curve could be at any time of the year, any temperature, and any altitude. So when we correct to 100 horsepower, that means when it's cold outside, even though it's corrected more power, it still will correct back to the 100 horsepower. So when you get a dyno sheet from Star, it's going to have corrected horsepower, which means it will be the baseline before we do your engine would have, if it's SAE, it's going to have that number. If it's STD, it will have that number. When we finish the job, the comparison results will still be with the same correction factor. So we've also learned that if you gain 40 horsepower with a Thrasher kit, it will gain 40 horsepower SAE corrected, and it will gain 40 horsepower STD corrected. The gain is the same. The measurement is a little bit different, just a small percentage because of the way the SAE and the standard correction. One's a Society of Automotive Engineers correction, and the other one is just called standard correction. They use different math, different formulas in the program. The dyno is only a tool. It doesn't tell you how fast your bike's going to go. We have customers and friends every day at the racetrack that have lots and lots of horsepower, and they ride their bike down the street and they have lots of horsepower. They have a dyno sheet in their bag that says their motorcycle made X amount of power. What really matters is what you think of the performance of your motorcycle, not what the dyno says. If your dyno says you gain 50 horsepower and you get on your bike and you ride it and it feels ho-hum, guess what? It probably didn't gain 50 horsepower. But if you got your motorcycle built and dynoed here, for instance, and I show you an end result of 50 horsepower gain, I promise you it will be seat of the pants, OMG, it will be miles per gallon, it will be noticeable. I had a Harley dealer ask me one day when he said he wanted to buy a mail order Thrasher kit to put in customers' bikes, and he said, is this something my customer can really feel? And I'm saying, compared to what? And he said, well, we do stage 1, 2s, and 3s for customers that they can't even really feel. They say they feel better, maybe a little bit, maybe they sound better, but they just can't tell enough difference for that much work and that much money. So, yes, make sure that you get what you pay for. Now, there's a lot left to talk about on dynamometers and correction factors and what it all means, but the next thing I want to talk about is pipes. And I know that's backwards, but just try and imagine pipes pointed the right way. There's a big deal going on about pipes. There's 2 into 1s, and there's 2 into 2s, and there's 2 into 1s into 2s, and true duals, and I mean, there's just everything out there. The deal that we have learned is the engine is 2 one-cylinder engines connected by a crankshaft. It has 2 injectors if it's a fuel-injected motorcycle, which most of them are from early 2000s all the way to now. There's hardly any carbureted Harleys or motorcycles anymore. But when you have 2 injectors, your tuner and the guy that tunes your bike and also the software you use to tune your motorcycle has the ability to tune the front cylinder different from the rear cylinder. And in order to make the best power and for the engine to run the best, get the most performance, best mileage, and also to last the longest, get reliable, is to have front and rear tuning separate. A good V-twin will have considerably more power on the front versus the rear, and they both want the same thing. So they both want different input to give you the same results, which is most power you can get on both cylinders. So what we do is we use 2 wideband O2 sensors. We screw one in the front pipe and one in the rear pipe, and we tune the cylinders individual of each other. That's not revolutionary, that's not big news, but I know there are some shops that only have one O2 sensor, and they'll put it in the collector, or they'll put a tube down the tailpipe, and they try to do the front one and they try to do the rear. But when you tune the front cylinder, it affects the rear cylinder because the intake manifold, where the throttle body goes, is communicative. In other words, that same throttle body and that same manifold feeds the air to both cylinders, and it's in a plenum area right between them where they communicate with each other. If you are really good at tuning fuel injection, you'll see that the fuel map required, and that's the how much fuel you put in each cylinder per throttle position per RPM is going to change as the RPM goes up, because the front cylinder will use some of the rear cylinder's fuel and air for a few RPM, and then another place in the RPM range, the rear will use some of the front cylinder's air and fuel. So it's very important to have someone that can measure the front and rear separately from each other. The pipes, we like a 2-in-1. I don't understand everything that people want to know about equal length and what primary lengths, but since there's a different time, the way it works, the rear cylinder fires, and then 300, say, degrees later, the rear fires, and then 400 degrees later, the front fires again. So each cylinder has they all have the same amount of time to get the 4 strokes in, but each cylinder goes through the collector at a different time. So I don't know of one primary length that's that's the same for both. I think the front one may need a longer one at some RPM than the rear, and the rear may need a longer one at some RPM than the front. So when you buy a really nice 2-in-1, and we use D&D, we use the Burn stainless, and they work really hard to make them equal length or try to make them close, but that's a compromise, just like a camshaft, and that's another story. Camshaft is only good at 1 RPM, so whatever cam you pick out and whatever pipe you pick out will be really great at 1 RPM. There's not many Harley-Davidson motorcycles or engines running around today that have the correct pipe and the correct cam for the same RPM. You've got a pipe that works good at some RPM, and you've got a cam that works good at another RPM, so the whole deal is a compromise. It takes a little while to figure all that out. Now, a little while might be your whole life. It might be working on the same project for a long time, or days and months, but we're learning every day. And that's the part I love about this job, is that we're able to learn this every day. So as far as 2-in-1, at the RPM we run, makes more power than straight pipes or 2-in-2s or true duals. Now, a lot of people like true duals, and I need to go back to the subject of pipes. Pipes do 3 things. They look good, they sound good, or they make power. Very rarely will you find a pipe that looks good, sounds good, and makes good power. That's a rare item right there. And there's companies that make really great ones. Now, the guys that want true duals, that's not going to make more power than a nice 2-in-1. I'm sorry, it just will not do it. We need, the true duals have, I'm sorry some of you have to go, and I know I'm long-winded, but it'd be like that for the rest of my life until I lose my voice and my attention span. Thanks you guys for watching, but they have to go. But back to the story on the pipes. True duals don't make as much power because they don't have the collector that's helping pull the wave out of the front cylinder and use it to the advantage of the rear cylinder, and it doesn't have the rear cylinder using the wave coming through the collector to pull the front cylinder through. So a tuned 2-in-1 will make more power over an RPM range. Why do we run straight pipes on the V-twins? The Buells, the EBRs, some of the really fast S&S powered drag bikes that are running around. The Harley team uses a 2-in-1. They've done a really good job with their 2-in-1, but it's a good compromise over what could be made in a narrow power band with a straight pipe that has expanded area. A step pipe is one where it starts off at 1 7/8 and goes to 2 inch and 2 1/8, and then the rear pipe the same way. But if they are the correct size and the correct length, it will make more power at 1 RPM than a combination of any of those pipes. So I know it's a little bit confusing, and maybe when you guys give me some feedback, we'll go back and I'll cover it a little more. I understand more about it than I can really communicate sometimes, and I'm very thankful for how much I understand about it and how much I've learned. But I believe that when the Harley team gets really pushed, the Pro Stock Harley team gets really pushed for performance, where somebody's just breathing down their neck and making more power and going faster than them. And I know Matt Smith and some of the EBRs are doing good, but they will eventually have to go to a straight pipe on each cylinder, I think, just from experience. Because the 2-in-1 works great up to an RPM, and the RPM that those guys are running now is a little above that. the Pro Stock cars, for instance, are using 4-in-1s on each side. Back in the day, there were some guys that had 180 exhausts where they had some cylinders communicating with cylinders from the other bank in a V8. And the most powerful engines in the world use straight pipes per cylinder, like the funny cars and the blown cars. They have to, just to get the pressure out in the amount of time they can get it. We're able to, at 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 3,000, 4,000, the RPM where we run our engine, we're able to do a good job tuning the exhaust and tuning the camshaft to work good in that RPM range, is why we don't run straight pipes. And you'll see some of the faster bikes that run Harley's V-twins, S&S engines, they're running, like I said, 2 big straight pipes just to get the exhaust out on time. Now, back over here to cams. I'm just about out of time here for my first tech talk, but the camshaft is another serious compromise. It's people are hung up on lift. Our fans, our friends, and our customers just focus on lift. They say, well, I got a 600 cam, I had a 500 cam, and I want a 700 cam. Well, I'm gonna tell you what, man, that's like saying a man and a woman, they're just different. And, or a person. All people are different. And the camshaft is the same way. We need to know the events of the camshaft. When does the valve open? When is it at peak lift? When does it close? The exhaust also has an opening and it has a closing. It has a peak lift degree also. So we have lift, duration, and of course the lobe centers and the lobe separation. And I'm not going to be able to explain all that right here in this talk. But the most important part about a camshaft is when the valve opens and when the valve closes, not how far it lifts. Now, cam bragging rights. You got the biggest cam. Oh yeah. I got a 700 and I had a 650 and I went to a 700. Yeah, you got the bragging rights, just like a dyno sheet. You got the most horsepower, but everybody can outrun you with less power. That's all power under the curve. And that's further down in my list of subjects I'd like to cover. But I have just barely skimmed across the top of the dyno and some of the questions you may have about it, and about pipes and some of the questions you'll have about it, and also about the camshaft. Compression ratio and head work. As you can see, we've got a lot to cover, and I'm not going to try and do that on every episode, but if this works out good enough and we have folks that are interested and folks that want to watch, I'll continue to do it, and I'll expand it a little more, and we'll maybe make it a little more technical or maybe a little less technical. But I'm going to continue to try and share the experiences and the knowledge that we've learned over these years. I'm not trying to sell anything, you guys. Yes, I have a Star shirt on, I have a Star hat, and I have a few little cool deals around here, and that is my day job. But I'm not, this is not a commercial. This is a freebie info exchange. I expect I'll get some great info back from some great people watching, and we'll keep doing this. But please give me feedback. Tell me what you would like to know more about and why, and I'll do my best job I can to try and explain it to you, because we stay busy at the shop here at Star Racing. We call it Star Power sometimes. It's really, everything belongs to Star Racing. It's been around for 40 years. This Thanksgiving 2019 will be 40 years in business, working on motorcycle racing engines and high performance engines, and we've been wonderful opportunity and blessings to be able to work on this every day and learn a lot. So back again, if you need to know a little bit more, have some questions about the dyno, the pipes, and the cams, we'll do that first. We'll cover all that stuff as we grow and as this goes on. Compression, headwork, and horsepower, and how that fits into the equation, I think will be next, along with touching up the first 3 subjects. Please take this disclaimer that I don't think that I know everything. I don't. I know that I know enough that I need to know more. That's hard to say. I know enough to know I need to know more, okay? That's very important in order to keep learning. So I know enough to get in trouble. I know enough to make mistakes on engine design, and I'm really learning fast, and I'd like to do a better job with this, so I'm sharing that. Ask me questions. Doesn't even have to be about the things on the board, but it's a blessing to share, I assure you. been wanting to do this for a long time. I'm not like giving away the recipe to a farm or anything, but I don't mind talking about what I know, because it's a gift that I've received from the good Lord to be able to gather this information my whole life and have the experience and the knowledge and the opportunities that I'm blessed with. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, and maybe we'll do something on Tuesdays like Tech Time Tuesdays with GB3 or something. And I'm George Bryce III, that's why I'm GB3, and I'm very thankful to be able to talk to you guys and share. So tune in next time, and let me know if it needs to be shorter or longer, okay? Thank you very much.